Thank you all very, very much for coming, and I'm delighted to see so many people. I'm delighted to be back for a second year of this, and I'm absolutely thrilled that there is a second year, and many, many congratulations to all those who put so much hard work into organising it. And it clearly was a great success. I hear that the sessions downstairs were a sellout or a stand-up or whatever, so that's great. I am not an expert in matters sustainable, unlike the panel, but I do passionately believe that we need both unbiased information and action, particularly in today's political climate, in which all sorts of values and campaigns that seem to us morally obvious and pragmatically essential have been steamrolled by the administration of the world's most powerful country for the moment. The theme of this year's debate is, quite rightly, the politics and value of sustainability. This will be followed by a keynote speech by Oxford Professor Paul Behrens, who usefully specialises in examining the nexus of climate, energy and food. The panel is wonderfully varied and engaged. We have someone representing a large national alcohol monopoly to a small coffee producer. We've got Judith Batchelor, who gave such an excellent speech last year, and a specialist in disseminating climate data via Lizzie Rudd, who is the most mainstream member of the wine trade here, of course, representing Berry Brothers and Rudd, which I'm delighted to say are engaged in the whole sustainability adventure. Personally, I'm particularly looking forward to hearing what Sarah Norell from Systembolaget in Sweden has to say, because she's in a very powerful position between consumer and producer, and as far as I can tell, has come up with all sorts of ways of increasing their commitment to sustainability and helping the consumer take the right decisions. But we'll be hearing more about that, and I look forward to it. So I hope everyone finds the evening challenging, engaging, and inspiring. I'm sure I will. And I'd love to hand over now to climate journalist Nick Breeze. Thank you.
Thank you, Jancis. I'm just going to start by introducing the panel. We have Judith Batchelor at OBE, who everyone knows works with UK Science Innovation. We have Lizzie Rudd from Berry Brothers and Rudd, and David Bringleson from Carbon Cloud, and Emma Loisel from Volcanic Coffee, and also who Jancis mentioned, Sarah Norell Moorburger from Systembolaget. And Paul, obviously, who's going to speak afterwards. So it is noticeable at the moment, this is a sort of a power, politics and policy, etc. Debate. But next month we have 30 years of COPs, the UN climate summits, which were meant to create the structural policies that bring down emissions. And yet this year we're going to have the record emissions of close to 40 billion tons of greenhouse gases. So we can honestly say that the policy there has failed, but we still have policy in every aspect of our day-to-day lives. And that's what we're going to sort of cover now. I just start with Paul. From an academic perspective, can you give us your own perspective on how the politics we have translates into the choices we have left in terms of effective planning for the next few decades?
Yeah, thanks so much, Nick. Oh, can you hear me? Sorry. Can you hear me okay? Oh, you can, okay, great, thanks. So I think it's important to see that the politics that we're already seeing is in part driven by the unsustainability of our systems. So both the environmental systems, but also the social systems. So if we look at food price inflation, for example, and cost of living crises and concerns about people's wallets, climate change is already part of that febrile political atmosphere, and it was one of the cited reasons for Trump. It was also partly driving the cost of living crisis in the UK. So actually, these dynamics will become more and more entrenched as we move forwards as the climate continues to worsen and extreme weather events continue to hit. And what we have to realize is that in many cases, and especially in agricultural systems, the very things that we need to do to bring down the environmental damage from the agricultural system are the things that are going to make us more resilient to climate change as well. And it's going to make us potentially able to reduce the costs of our food, to reduce the costs of living. And the same is true on the energy transition in the future. So I think that's the thing we've got to bear in mind as a country. And then when we look for leadership, well, there's not an awful lot of leadership going on. And I think we need to start thinking about sort of bottom-up adaptation to climate, working together in groups, and actually working hard, on the ground to improve the situation, whilst also fighting for those systemic shifts that we need to see in the agricultural system.
Okay, thanks. And Judith, can you give us your perspective on how sort of the climate environmental challenges and the politics, they sort of interact in the food and drinks area that most people in this room are sort of engaged in?
Yeah, can you hear me okay? Brilliant. I think it's a fascinating question, and you talk to most businesses and there's a view that everyone believes that business doesn't want good regulation and doesn't want mandatory reporting, but actually the opposite is true, because if we've got really good politicians who understand the challenges, who can make good policy that delivers policy outcomes, and that's the important part, is the outcomes, not the policy, then that creates a level playing field for business. And without that, it's a bit like the Wild West, and lots of people in the room will appreciate what that feels like when there isn't that level playing field. And it's more important in food and drink because it's so highly competitive that if you don't have that level playing field, all of the things that we would want, so equal opportunities for large businesses, small businesses, things like an enabling environment for investment, all of those things are impossible if you don't have good regulation. And just a sort of little anecdote, in my last few years at Sainsbury's, I went part-time and I took on a role as a non-exec at the Environment Agency. And someone said to me, oh, well, that's a really interesting move, Judith, poacher turned gamekeeper. And this might sound quite naive, but I had never, ever thought of regulated businesses and regulators being poacher and gamekeeper. I had thought of them as being two opposite ends of the telescope, both wanting to achieve proper outcomes, and that if policy is well made, and it's well made that enables regulated businesses to enact that policy well, then everyone gets the desired outcome that they need to make things better. And then I realised that not everyone thinks like that. So for me, there is a real value in getting some of this right. But in order to do that, we've got to focus on policy outcomes, not just policy.
Okay, and so you're sort of regulatory clarity that people can really recognise.
Oh, we're desperate for it, for it.
Okay, Lizzie, I saw you nodding your head today. Can you talk about how a family business as traditional and long, how you've adopted these changes and made them part of your sort of current business?
Yes, so we absolutely welcome, to Judith's point, the right regulation, the right kind of taxes. I wish the government would think about what kind of behaviours it wants to encourage, like outcomes, because, for example, for Berry Brothers and Rudd, as a family business, we're with the farmers at the moment. We're looking ahead going, oh my God, how are we going to pass our business on to the next generation, the same as they are, because the tax implications have just changed. Now we've got this inheritance tax coming in that we didn't have before from April next year, and I candidly have no idea how the key shareholders in Berry Brothers and Rudd are going to deal with that. Not that we haven't taken a lot of advice to try and work our way around it. And we will work our way around it. We have to. But, what they've done is encourage short-term thinking and focus on profit. which is the absolute opposite of what they, I think, intended and what the world needs, and certainly is the opposite to how we as a business operate. You know, we're very excited last week to have been certified B Corp, which hopefully shows how seriously we take this. And now we're like, oh my God, what have they done? So it's frustrating, but I wish we had the right kind of regulation that led us to the kind of behaviours we need.
Okay, and so as a regulator, as a sort of this regulatory sort of gatekeeper, if you like, how have you experienced this getting it right between consumers, businesses, the whole sort of playing field? What have been the biggest challenges and successes?
I would like to start with saying that we like the regulations our owners put on us. We are a state-owned company and the sole seller of alcoholic beverages on the Swedish market. And I would also like to add that, like you said, the leveled playing field is something our suppliers are asking for us to be very clear about our requirements. That's when it becomes more easy. And like the world is today, with a lot of uncertainty, that's the worst thing, obviously. And being a company as Systembolaget, where our owners ask us to be the forerunners when it comes to sustainability, it's very easy in a company where the values are very much into our mission and vision, which is a society where alcohol can be enjoyed without harming people or the environment. It's easy to continue working in that direction. So I think that as a retailer, you also need to be the facilitator of the interaction between consumers. 8 out of 10 consumers in Sweden want to make sustainable choices. We have suppliers. They are also having expectation on us driving. If you, as a supplier or producer, are investing in good practice, you want to have a business opportunity with that, obviously. So that's another important thing. And then it's us sort of being part of the system and making it possible to drive. For example, we had organic products. We talked about that today. Organic is the old sustainable, I understand today, but I think it's still important from many aspects. And we said that we want to have 10% organic, and a couple of years later we had 15% organic for the full assortment. We have today almost 25% being organic when it comes to wine. And that's the example of when all these different parts of the system works very well together. Because we have been able to have an assortment that is wide and deep, a lot of organic products for the consumer to choose when the consumer is ready, and the producers are sort of changing the way of making their products towards organic. So that was an example.
And Emma, coming from a startup perspective, how does all of this sound to you in terms of the challenges of regulations and sort of trying to navigate it all?
So Volcano Coffee Works, as a brand that's been in the market for 15 years. Yeah. So we started with a very clear ethos around ethically traded coffee. I find it, and we've built on that. We're a B Corp. We've just recertified and improved our B Corp score. And to me, that is really a baseline. It's an example of how a business should behave. I actually used B Corp as a way to cope with COVID when 97% of our business closed, because we're mainly trade at that time. And it was great to get all that data and actually be able to go to sleep at night. And I wanted to find out if we actually ran a B Corp, and we have a very strong score. But I think it's interesting we talk about regulation, and in our industry, for example, organic is a really interesting one. If we said we were going to be an organic coffee roastery, we wouldn't be able to buy off a significant proportion of our smallhold farmers because they can't afford to be organically certified. Now, we know their product is organic because they can't afford the fertilizers. And we contract with them on long contracts will enable them to have this stable pricing. So how we support the sustainability of their businesses is actually in different industries and different markets. What we put our effort is in places like really working deep with in our supply chain. So we have a relationship in Brazil with a farm, the farm Mio, where we're building with them a project called Sombra, which is about growing coffee under shade. Now that is a product that we could buy a lot cheaper elsewhere in Brazil, particularly as tariffs come in America. If we spot buy, we've contracted 3 years out. And that enables us to collect data to say, how can coffee be climate resistant it's incredibly impacted by climate change? And we are open sourcing that data to the whole industry. Because for me, it's not about us winning, it's about an industry and raising the bar. And I think when I see regulation, that is what, to me, regulation needs to support for big and for small businesses.
Okay. And David, you're a business that's sort of born out of the modern sustainability drive. How have you experienced the people that you work with? How have they adapted to it? How do you find the integrity of the data that you're getting hold of? What's that landscape like for you?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'd say it's maturing very rapidly, and we're moving very nicely towards more and more stakeholders and more companies looking for hard quantitative data to have discussions and planning around. And if we go back to our company then, how we started, basically, but with the realization that organizations in all different stages of value chains within food and beverage can decarbonize and still be profitable as businesses. But there is a piece missing. There is the data layer where you can communicate up and down the value chain quantitatively, precisely how good, how much, so that you can justify investments, you can justify changes. And so we set out to try to solve that problem. And from when we started doing that about 6 years ago until now, I'd say we've seen a tremendous change in maturity, where now we're moving towards more and more retailers like Systembolaget wanting to get really good quality data to be able to have the conversations with their suppliers. And we see this in multiple places now, where you want to start, you're realizing 2030 is getting closer, 2050 is getting closer. If you are going to meet your targets, you need to start talking numbers with your suppliers. You need to build that into part of the contract negotiations and the plans and so on, where if you're measuring in a way where both can trust the data, you agree on how that is done, you can say, all right, so what is a 10% reduction worth over so and so long time period? And then you can really start seeing the change happening.
Okay. And obviously this starts to build integrity and trust within everything that's going on. From the retailer perspective, Lizzie, how do you start conveying this to your audience? Or is there an audience pull?
Bit of both, but it's a mixture. As we were saying in the communication workshop earlier, which was very helpful, by the way. Thank you. Retailers like us, wine merchants like us, we want to be talking about this, the credentials and what producers are doing in an informative, human way. But it's quite interesting because often I've been talking to wine producers and I will ask them that question over lunch or a cup of coffee or a glass of wine, and they say, oh yeah, we're doing all these really, really, really amazing things, and they tell me all the details. And I'm like, why didn't you tell us that before? And I'm sure our buying team knew that already, but I didn't, because nobody had communicated it. And I feel very strongly that it's our responsibility, because it's easier for us to talk about what amazing things wine producers and spirits producers across the world are doing, and especially when it's regenerating the land and increasing biodiversity and decarbonising. That's a job that we take very seriously and we would like to do a lot more of. And then the pull part is, it's mixed, and it depends on the country, depends on the market. the age group, young people, 100%. They will expect this. They're the customers of the future. This is a hygiene factor for them. They will expect this. For the older generation, it's a mixed bag.
Okay. And Emma, I was just wanting to know, again, on the consumer side, is sustainability something that you feel that they value in selecting your product? And how do you engage with them on this?
I don't have evidence to show consumers will actively select. What they will do is deselect. And they will choose to, on brands that they associate their identity with, they will choose it based on the quality of the product, and they will choose not to engage if they then don't see the credentials that they believe meet their own identity. So I always say to startups that are in this space, it's if you are just coming with a better sustainability story, but without a better product, then you're on risky ground, right? So I do believe core that business has to be a good business first, but I do also believe that a business that looks at sustainability is a stronger business. I probably extend sustainability beyond environment more. I look at sustainability in a sustainable business because that protects the people in the business, the community it's in, doing it in a productive sustainability way. I also think, and particularly in my industry, in the coffee, we've missed the positioning around sustainability in the sense of what is good that reaches into the sustainability of our customers and from a health perspective. And I think that's the next frontier.
Okay. In terms of sort of the next frontier, and you have many people in this room are already quite far into this journey, and they're a very small selection. So in that case, they're sort of leaders in sustainability, but we have to reach much further and we have to accelerate that change. And without the sort of policy support we were talking about earlier, or clarity, can you sort of give some thoughts on how we might work together to accelerate change, whether it's data integrity or whatever it is that helps support that?
Do you want me to?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's all about collaboration, no doubt. And I had another question on my eye here, but I'm gonna. It's okay. And it's a journey together. And I think that there are many engaged people in this room, and we come with different perspectives and different knowledge. And obviously, together we can go further and increase speed, because it is important to increase speed. So harmonizing, finding collaboration versus competition in this field is very important. And we share as much as we can. For example, as a sort of backbone for our sustainability work, we have made for many years now a benchmark on all the certifications that we share with anyone who wants.
Yeah.
Because this is a way of knowing how to eliminate risks, but also a way of the certifications to know how do we rank in terms of when competing with others.
Okay. And how have you found the growth in people wanting to do business with you over the last few years in this sort of adopting these things?
Are you talking about the suppliers now?
Yeah,
suppliers. Yeah, I think that obviously, since we are quite a big buyer and in that case quite an important market, we have a big opportunity and also a big responsibility to drive that change. And I heard this morning actually one of the man on the stage said that yes, it is an investment, but can we because of this investment in sustainable practices, we won the tender in Sweden, which meant that we had a payback already.
Right. Okay. And Judith, can you offer some advice on how investing in innovation, investing in change actually is sort of making us more resilient, again, in the absence of the supporting policies that are not really coming online.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these things are, I suppose, the science and innovation around data insights that can better diagnose a problem, and then those data insights can help you plan your intervention and then measure the performance of that intervention. So you create a virtuous circle, but it all starts with good data and good data insights to begin with. If I think about some of the work that's already been done, so government is quite helpful in this sense through things like the UK Research and Innovation. So there's something called Smart Data Research UK. And Smart Data Research UK is basically taking all the digital data. These are academics researching this. So things like your Strava, Apple Watch data, your loyalty card data, things that you've given permission to be shared for research purposes, and combining that with public data for the public good. And that is extremely powerful, because you start to think about what if my supermarket loyalty card data could be shared with the NHS in a secure data environment, and at a very local level, still anonymously, can create links between foods that are purchased, diets, health, and health outcomes. So I think there are things that you could do. So potentially, as a group of people, you could get together and talk about how loyalty card data is shared. You could talk about, responsible drinking and what that really means, and take some of the anecdotal narrative that quite often accompanies a lot of these discussions, and really place it in the foundations of really good data. That, of course, requires data standards, data formats, data interoperability, which is the bit where you do need someone like government or some governance body to come together. So again, if there was something this group of people could do, is come together and agree what your data standards look like and your data sharing principles look like, because that's a big enabler to anything. Because if you've got good data, you can point it at any strategy, you can point it to any intervention. But if you're not using the same currency, speaking the same language, then it's not much use.
Okay, and that's a sort of future-looking thing. Lizzie, looking forward to 2030, what do you see as the main sort of goals and the challenges that you think you're going to encounter on the sustainability journey?
Personally, as a business?
As a business, yeah.
Quite a lot, I think. There's so much coming towards all of us at the moment, isn't there? And, when we look out, we need a completely new paradigm, and we very much we decided to really focus on nature, because that's something that we think people understand. When you start talking about carbon, everyone's eyes glaze over, and it gets, people just switch off within a few seconds. And but everybody understands nature, and so we want to put nature at the heart of everything that we do, and we believe that nature should be at the heart of the world economy. So that's if we can start behaving like that, then maybe we together, all of us, can create a movement. And so that's why we're working with people like the Regenerative Viticulture Foundation and the Circular Bioeconomy Alliance, that's a mouthful, CBA for short, and various others, obviously B Corp. And if we put nature at the heart of everything, and if we can start to measure, to Judith's point, and collect the data, which is possible now in soil health, in biodiversity. Don't ask me the technicalities, because I'm more macro than detail, but we know it's possible. So if we can align, then that's a really good avenue to go down and something great to communicate out to our customers and the world. So that's the direction we're going in. But we are also decarbonising, of course, because we've got to get to net zero by 2050. Berry Brothers and Rudd's going to be, our target is to get everything that's within our control down, reduced almost to zero by 2030. And, that's quite a big challenge for a complex business that operates all over the world. And then, obviously, that doesn't include Scope 3. That's going to be reduced as well, but that's the big one that comes later.
Okay. And, well, we're sat next to a data guy. David, on the journey forward from here, and we're at a time now where there's a lot of pushback against climate change and sustainability. There's a lot of companies stepping away from their commitments. How do you see people holding on? What's your sort of forecast for the next 5 years? Is it sort of one of going backwards, or is it still going to keep the pace?
Yeah, predictions are generally hard, specifically about the future. So who knows, right? I'm willing to be positive and hoping that we will hold out and continue working. I guess Europe is becoming more and more of an island, maybe, in this regard. But I think there is this collaborative aspect of solving various aspects, and I think climate change, which is the key issue we're working with, the carbon, and there is this thing where if we start working with it, and we're getting the first thing where we get stuck easily is about how do we get access to the data. So you're working with something, you have your core business, and then someone is asking you to incorporate additional things to think about, like carbon footprints or biodiversity or anything else which isn't your core business. If you don't immediately know how to measure it, you don't know what to do, how to go about it, it kind of gets very frustrating very quickly, and you don't know how to move forward. But if we can lower the barrier for getting the data, again, assessment of where you are, then suddenly it becomes much easier for each and every one within these companies to start thinking about a strategy. And everyone is entitled to come up with their own strategy. You can be forward-leaning, saying we're willing to go ahead and invest and maybe get a little bit more expensive with lower emissions and go to market like that. Someone else might think, no, we'll stay a little bit behind, lower price, but higher emissions, we'll bet on that. You can bet on any strategy, really, right? As long as there is someone downstream from you in the value chain who cares at all, and you can use this, in your contract negotiations again. And I think here, a key thing here, I think that the professional buyer will matter a lot more than the end consumer will do when it comes to this. But one thing that I think, looking long term, and what I think we can do here in Europe and what we can export, is that if we establish this collaboration here and we figure out how to get the emissions down in the production systems, in the transport system, in the agricultural systems, and so on, I think that when the rest of the world comes around, we can export that and we can use that to our benefit quite a lot, I believe. Because climate change is not going to go away just because the world leaders are fighting. I mean, it's going to be an increasing pressure. So one way or another, we are going to have to solve it. And I really, really think there is a business opportunity in being somewhat forward-leaning and trying to figure this one out.
Okay. Emma, can you talk about your challenges and out to 2030?
Yeah, I love data. If you ask any of my team, I'm a data obsessive. And so I'm so supportive of data. The problem is it's really hard and it often doesn't exist to the level we need to make business decisions. And so I am a little bit more pragmatic, and I look at it and go, if I only made business decisions based on data I could use to influence contracts in a positive way, there is a lot of business decisions I would not have made, which we have made. So to give you an example, 5 years ago, now bear in mind, we're a small independent roastery in Brixton, hand roast all the coffee fresh every day. We moved our wholesale bags, trade bags, from a 1 kilo to a 2 kilo. That it's all recyclable plastic, the bags that there's coffees in. It saved the amount of plastic. When I calculated it, we could layer a plastic bag over Greater London every year in a saving and a business decision that just meant we ship in 2 kilo bags, not 1 kilo bags. Obviously, my question was, why have we not done this 3 years ago? But that to me is still not good enough, because I don't want to send out in plastic bags. We're a fresh product. You should think about fresh coffee like you think about fresh bread. So why can I buy a bag of flour in the supermarket in a paper bag, but I cannot find a manufacturer in the UK or actually anywhere else that can give us a paper bag, fully recyclable, that coffee can go from our factory in West Norwood to mostly London-based, leading restaurants, the Nobu, Riv Cafe, all these great restaurants that put it straight in the hopper, and the next week we send them the next lot, right? In a paper bag. This doesn't have to last on a shelf for 6 months because it's a fresh product. And so what we've tried twice, we've failed twice, and I say to the team, try again, because that to me, we don't have the data to tell us what the benefit's going to be. So I think there is a responsibility on business that we can't wait for government and regulation. We have to go. It is more expensive. It is, you can buy a lot cheaper coffee in a lot worse packaging than ours, right? And that means some places we're not competitive. But I would prefer to run a business that I think is improving little steps all the time, even if I don't have the data.
So you're really doing that sort of innovation on an internal scale. Okay, Sarah.
It is a journey, isn't it? And I must talk a little bit more about the climate impact and data as well, PCF. And I think, Jancis, this is what you wanted to hear a little bit more about. And so a couple of years, several years ago, we talked about lighter bottles, lighter packaging, alternative packaging, and you talked about packaging as well. Important part. About 25% of our emissions come from packaging. But then we had these producers saying, well, you can't only have packaging as your sort of focus when it comes to limiting the climate impact. So how do we do it? We want to be inclusive. We want to give credit to all the good investments and efforts being done in the supply chain. So we ended up with saying that we need product carbon footprint. We need to measure with data what a product has as its footprint on the carbon emissions. So that's what we are working with right now, and actually, David, you are our partner in this. The aim, the vision we have is that we can use it for helping consumer, making more informed choices, but also for the suppliers for free, a tool to measure their impact if there is already an life cycle analysis or anything. It's easy to fill in, but you can also see how do I measure in comparison with others. So an opportunity to find those low-hanging fruits. And we just finished the pilot, and we hope that we will have a lot of interested producers, suppliers to join us going forward. So, and if you want to know anything about this, please let me know.
Okay, Paul. But Paul, are you going to give your keynote?
I am.
Okay, but give us a brief roundup of the next 5 years until...
The next 5 years in agriculture in general?
Yeah, because that's your expertise.
Yeah, so we're moving into a system which is going to be harder and harder on producers, and we're seeing the chances of multi-bread basket failures increase. We just saw today actually that 4 crops made up a lot of the inflation that we saw in the last year in food prices, and that was driven by climate change, so things like coffee, cocoa, and we're going to have to expect more of that. And so I think as a sort of agricultural industry, which food and drinks, drinks is part of the agricultural system, you have to be sort of lobbying both within the system, and so working in industry groups and asking for these regulations that are going to keep everybody on the same playing field, but doing more for the environment, more for nature, more for climate, on which I think is a really good point, because nature is often correlative with climate. So if you're doing nature-based approaches, you're also getting climatic approaches. So you have to be lobbying within the industry, but I think, and as I'll talk about in a minute, you have to be lobbying outside the industry too, in the rest of agriculture. Because actually where the big piece is in for nature and for climate is animal agriculture, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But as you're all sort of in the agricultural system, agriculturalists, you need to be talking at that. And I'm actually quite worried about the next sort of 15, 20 years in terms of how the food system is going to look. But if we are able to do all the things that we know are good for nature anyway, at least in terms of our modelling, we actually see net incomes go up in agriculture in the UK. So it's always this picture of light and dark. We've got a lot of bad things coming our way, but if we address them ahead of time, we can actually not do that damage until we're forced to address them later on and we've already done all that damage.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. We've got time for a couple of questions. Would anyone like to ask? Zhao? Anne, are you going to be able to...
My client is white.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much. Jean Bourros from the Wines of Volunteer Sustainability Program. I wanted to ask something to Sarah, actually. Thank you very much for all the debate. My question is very much to the point of Paul's last intervention about, we all know that, well, or some of us at least know, that the wine industry overall, in terms of carbon emissions, represents around in between 0.1 to 0.3% of all carbon emissions worldwide. So we're virtually could say almost negligible with regards to the big picture and the big problem. And we also know that energy production, housing, and transportation are indeed the big villains in the room, let's call it this way. So in the case of Systembolaget, considering that you are a state-owned organization, are you within the big framework of the Swedish government? Are you kind of a lighthouse? Are you kind of an example towards all of these other sectors that indeed are the ones that should be being, pressed and having all of these tools with regards to climate change and sustainability that, as far as I know, in a more of a EU context, are practically in existence. So I was trying to understand if Systembolaget is within the framework of the Swedish government an example on the way to go, or not really.
I hope I understood your question correctly, but we want to be lighthouse, and we are very humble when it comes to the situation in the whole world when it comes to alcohol sales, wine sales. Also, we see a downturn in wine sales. So investing then in sustainable practices need to have a sort of leverage. That's how we see it. Was that the answer on your question?
And if you are basically an example to the rest of the government with regards to the way you're getting out of the status quo, pressuring your suppliers, creating all of these tools with carbon emissions, making all of these benchmarks on the programs. In fact, demanding for sustainability requirements and the certifications to go into the market when the wine industry is really not the problem. The problem are housing, transportation, and this kind of other sectors that seem to just be suffering on the side as if nothing was really with them, and still the world is burning, and this industry is actually making a huge effort, when in fact their responsibility on the overall problem is negligible.
The directive is the same for us as for all other Swedish companies. And politics is politics. So,
has anyone else got a question?
Hi there, Marta Mendonça from the Porto Protocol. First, a comment, very simple. I think we all sometimes forget that we are nature as well, but that was not my question. My question is to Lizzie, to Sarah, and to Emma, I believe. Can you give us three or two very practical examples on how you, as on one hand trade, and you as a producer, communicate sustainability as a whole to your consumers? How do you educate them in the most practical fashion?
So a great example for us is our product. One of our products, Sombra. So there's two. The two I'll use, Sombra, which is our agroforestry project. we enable our consumers to engage at whatever level they wish. And I think that's part of it, having it almost like an onion. Some consumers want to understand the microbiome of the soil, that the reason why these plants are growing in lower altitudes when they should only grow in higher altitudes, and how the diversity of plants around them is therefore actually growing more productive crops and needing less water. And these guys are going, and we have scientists come in and enable our consumers to come in and actually hear from the scientists. Some of them just want to understand it's a great product in the environment. Our Rise Up coffee is supporting 85 farmers in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And again, some want to, if you drink coffee in WeWork, you'll be drinking the Rise Up blend. We have Marceline come into our roastery. And I think it's about creating the communication channels that consumers and also some of our big, WeWork's a great example, where they really care about that and they really want those stories to come alive. But I think we've also got to remember consumers are busy, and if we demand them to have the level of knowledge and understand the microbiome soil to every level, they switch off. So it's enabling them to engage at and when they wish at the level they want to go.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But I'm also going to be very honest here, because I personally don't think that Berry Brothers and Rudd are very good at this yet. So I found that session this afternoon very helpful. And where we have gained traction is exactly as Tim described earlier, is where we've put photos on our website of beehives, for example. And we did, Saskia from Chateau Lafitte did a beautiful video of some of the wonderful things they're doing at Chateau Lafitte. And that was really, really effective. So we need to be doing a lot more of that to bring, as a lot of our Bordeaux producers are saying, we need to bring the romance back to Bordeaux. We need to bring out the romance of wine and fine wine. And I look at some of our emails that go out to our customers and I go, oh, it's so boring. Because it's exactly as you were describing earlier, it was like, the scores and the tasting notes. Obviously, Jancis's tasting notes accepted because they're wonderful. But we need more than that. We need the stories, and we need to capture the imagination and the romance. So it's work in progress. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think we can do this much better as well. It's also a journey. But I would like to take two examples. One is the most sustainable products. We have a sort of a communication framework in our stores and online. And that is to make it really easy for those who doesn't want to dig more deeply into the information. But the information is there. It's a very clear framework, and etc. But secondly, it is really the people who works in our store, my colleagues out in our 450 stores, who are really knowledgeable and passionate about selling wine and food combinations, and about also sustainability.
Okay, I think we have run out of time now. There's one more question, very quickly.
Hello, Lucielle Sablier. Thank you all so much. I'd be really fascinated to hear from the panel on how you think about reconciling alcohol and sustainability in the broader sense of the word. And I recognise the gentleman's comments around, them actually not being a huge contributor in terms of a carbon perspective, but perhaps more broadly thinking about the social aspects of sustainability in terms of contribution to health and wellness, and it may have more to answer for in that regard.
So to start, did you hear the question clearly?
How we reconcile the social part, yes, that's really important as well. And we have our benchmark with the certification being one important part, but we also have this platform where all our suppliers are mapping their supply chains in order for us to know where was it actually produced, this product. And then we can, using the certification and questionnaires, we can sort of limiting the the risks, and if there's a high risk, we will probably make a visit to the producer.
I think the question was more about the responsibility of alcohol consumption in general, but
yes.
I also think that Paul might cover some of
I'm
that
going to
in
do
his
that
talk.
very, very quickly, because that's the core of Systembolaget. We're in business to help limiting the harmful effects. So welcome to visit one of our stores. They are very clean. There are no promotions. We are very hard on checking age, how old someone is, etc. So yes, we sell differently than, because it's a product that has its back sides.
Okay, I think we're going to have to wrap up because Paul's due on now. We've just gone over time. But thank you very much, and thank you to the panel. Thank you.